Two of the most influential bands in music history.
If you do things differently, you can get noticed more than if you do things the same as everyone else, you know.
The minute you heard New Order, you were like, they're one of me or I'm one of them. It was instant.
One incredible tale.
We ended up having a rave at Peter Gabriel's. And yeah, it was fucking chaos, man. It was fantastic.
I was so angry, I just sprung across the room at Rob's throat.
This is Transmissions, the definitive story of Joy Division and New Order. Coming up on episode 5, Factory Records is in financial hot water once again.
You know, the thing is that we were very good at being a group. We were very good at writing songs. And you'd have to say that if you looked at everybody else round us, maybe they weren't as good at their jobs as we were as doing the music.
And so New Order must go to new lengths to keep Factory alive.
We were kind of like selling out by degrees, if that's the word.
In the process, creating their biggest hit to date.
Well, True Faith was very radio friendly. For once, we started getting played on mainstream radio.
And connecting to a whole new generation of fans, almost by chance.
I just listened to it over and over and over on repeat, and I was, blown away.
By 1987, New Order were well and truly back on track. Manager Rob Gretton was back where he belonged, leading his band from the front. Brotherhood had charted in the top 10 and given New Order a stateside sleeper hit in the form of Bizarre Love Triangle. Everywhere they went, the group were playing bigger and bigger concerts. They'd even got used to performing on Top of the Pops.
Yeah, we did. They got used to us as well. Then it was like, why don't we just mime? It's right. It's really bad playing it live.
That's right. Somehow New Order had stumbled their way into mainstream success. Which should mean a pretty comfortable lifestyle for the band's members, right?
I think we were all sort of put on wages, and then we all sort of started getting money from gigs ourselves. So we felt like we were making a bit of money. But also the company was putting money, from what I can understand, into the Hacienda, which as the years went by, some of us didn't like and some of us did, because some people like gambling.
The Hacienda nightclub, co-owned by New Order and Factory Records, had been a money pit since the day it opened in Manchester in 1982. Half a decade later, the situation hadn't exactly improved, with much of the band's money tied up in the day-to-day running of this colossal club. Peter Hook, who wrote an entire book called How Not to Run a Nightclub, with a little accounting primer for you.
So what Factory was doing was it was putting money in the Hacienda that it owed us. So we were putting our money in and Factory putting their money in, but that money that Factory was putting in was actually ours. So if they put 50 grand in, it meant that on the balance sheet, they owed us 50 grand. You know, Factory were putting 50% into the Hacienda, but they were just running up a bigger bill with New Order and Joy Division, you know, because they couldn't pay them because they were putting it in the Hacienda.
For all their transatlantic gallivanting, New Order were always loyal to Manchester and the dream of the Hacienda, money pit or not.
I remember we went to an accounts meeting and Barney was like, well, it's just like having a credit card. You're just running up your credit card all the time. You're not actually stopping it and saying enough is enough, because it was like, well, if you stop it now, so-and-so will lose their job or you'll lose your house. And so, you know, we don't want you to lose your job or your house. So we just carried on.
The Hacienda had been founded on idealistic terms. The idea of community lay at its very core, as resident DJ Mike Pickering well knew.
What I wanted to do was reverse what happened generally in clubs, which was it was quite a bit of money to get in. The people that we wanted in were like, kind of a lot of them were unemployed or on really low income. So we said, right, if you're on the dole, you can get in for £1. If you're at NHS, £1, all that kind of. But we wanted to kind of reverse door policy, really. People like us who wore Fred Perry T-shirts couldn't get in clubs, but they'd let thugs in ties in who would just, drink loads of beer and fight, and, because they wore a shirt and tie.
An admirable endeavour, but not exactly a licence to print money.
Look, there was always pressure because there was some pretty bad business decisions made down the line. The mortgage was a really big thing. But no, you just wanted to keep it open and have good nights there, really, And I think that was a factory thing. You never heard the word profit at factory. Or you very rarely heard people talk about money. It was art, really. Obviously, the people whose money it was will think differently, and so they should.
The fact is, with the Hacienda struggling, New Order found themselves sustaining an entire ecosystem, one that had grown to be cherished by the city they called home. It wasn't as simple as just removing yourself from a failing operation.
I had this discussion with Barney many times, and what happened with New Order and in New Order was that Barney and I would go, oh shit, man, should we kick off? But the band might split up. Oh man, what should we do? So there was this weird thing that you didn't want to jeopardise the group by kicking off about the Hacienda or things that were wrong in New Order or anything like that, So, yeah, we were chickens.
But if you were growing up in Manchester at that time, New Order were hometown heroes, magnanimously pumping life into the city's streets. DJ Paulette.
In a way, I think that everything that they did was fed back into Manchester. Maybe it was that reverse thing, whereas they felt that they might have been ripped off by us because we were taking everything. They were like being so successful, and then their money was being ploughed back into something that was a big old money sponge that they weren't getting any comeback from. But we got everything, and it was fantastic. We got the club, we got the music, we got the superstars. It was like win, win, win on all corners.
That had always been Factory Records boss Tony Wilson's vision. A Manchester to be proud of, at the epicentre of UK culture.
The idea was we pay royalties to Manchester. Without the alive culture of this city, of this town, right? Joy Division would not have been what they were. New Order would not have been what they were without this town. So while everyone's getting the royalties and getting the money, let's pay a few royalties to the town, which is the idea of building them the best club in Europe.
Tony Wilson wanted the best club in Europe. And Tony Wilson usually got what he wanted, one way or the other. Which brings us to substance.
Tony Wilson asked me what car he should buy. I recommended his Jaguar. When he got his Jaguar, it had a CD player, and he wanted to have all the New Order singles and B-sides on one CD. Now, you couldn't blow them yourself in those days. So he asked Rob and asked us if we would consider putting all the singles on one record.
A greatest hits record? That doesn't sound very New Order, does it? Peter Saville.
The rationale for Substance was that Tony wanted to listen to Blue Monday on a CD and the other singles. And because they never put the tracks they released as singles, they never put those tracks on albums. I mean, it was a ridiculous notion of a New Order greatest hits. I think that's an oxymoron, actually. So it was actually New Order singles.
And aside from providing Tony Wilson with an adequate driving soundtrack, a compilation might solve some other problems nagging away in the background.
Okay, so we've done Brotherhood, which probably didn't do quite as well as the Americans would have hoped. Also, the bills were going up. And then there was this other thing that was going on in the background, because Factory owed us a lot of money. And it's like, well, how about if we put all Blue Monday Perfect, put all the singles on an album? Yeah, that'd be great, because it's like, they can't buy it on an album. It'd be great, and it's only selling out a tiny little bit. And the Americans went, as they would, because the major labels are big fans of compilation albums. Yeah, it's a surefire money winner. How much is it going to cost? Nothing. But it would be really, really good if you could do a hit single, and we could put that one on as well. That would be the icing on the cake.
The man voicing that desire would have been none other than New Order's American manager, Tom Atencio.
Tony Wilson came to me and said, we need to release a greatest hits package in America to pay the inland revenue bills that we have. And I said, that's understandable and fantastic, Tony, but you haven't had a significant hit in America yet.
Shep Pettibone's remix of Bizarre Love Triangle had made New Order's biggest dent yet in America. But it hadn't entered the promised land of the Billboard Hot 100. It was more of a college radio hit.
It made American college kids really want to dance. It really went down well in America. Over here, it was like tumbleweed. I think the reviews usually started with yawn, New Order. And I can remember at the NME describing it as a bunch of idiot savants. And I didn't know what one was, so I didn't know whether to be flattered or insulted.
For New Order's fans, whether or not they charted was, of course, entirely beside the point. Paul Morley.
I was more interested in sort of following my own emotional response to this group, having decided at many stages that for me, and it appeared for many, many other people, not least because of the extraordinary run of amazing singles they released, that they were the perfect pop group. And they understood about, what a perfect pop single was. And that didn't necessarily mean astounding lyrics or traditional song structures. But again, just sort of tapping into their own mystery and their own weirdness and their own way that they were put together in such a unique way, where each member of the group operated in almost their own universe.
A touching sentiment, but the American label couldn't market an album on weirdness alone. New Order needed a home run hit record, and so it was suggested that they should write one. Bernard Sumner.
Rob, we've got to write top 40 hit. That's how he used to talk. He didn't really, but that's how I remember him talking. And he went, we've got to write a top 40 hit. Right, how do we do that?
Just go in and write a hit single. Okay. And Tom Atencio came up with a suggestion that it would be a good idea to work with this guy called Stephen Hague, who at the time had just done Madame Butterfly with Malcolm McLaren, which coincidentally was a big hit at mine and Gillian's abode in Macclesfield.
Enter super producer Stephen Hague, who'd already had chart success with another British electronic group, the Pet Shop Boys, featuring Neil Tennant.
New Order would be categorised more as a rock band, and Pet Shop Boys were defiantly a pop band. And we were more about hit singles than they were, I think. We were judged on the last chart position, and I don't think New Order probably ever have been. New Order are a sort of mythic presence coming out of Joy Division. They could have been touring with The Cure or something like that. Pet Shop Boys in the 80s, in the second half of the 80s in America, had a stream of top 10 hits. And so, we could be touring with Rick Astley,
So the idea with bringing Stephen Hague into the mix was that he might be able to bring out a little of New Order's inner Pet Shop Boys.
We never met him. We just went in the studio and we had two kind of vague ideas. But I think they were just like bass lines, really. But the fact we had two of them was sort of like two more than we had when we did Confusion. So we were moving on from semi-pro. And we worked with Stephen, and Stephen had ideas about songwriting.
True Faith, I had a bass line. I wrote that. And Stephen Hague went, okay, that's enough, right? You go and write the lyrics now.
And right, well, we're not doing anything until you've written the lyrics, Bernard. So we were in this flat and basically locked Bernard in the flat and wouldn't let him out until he'd written the words. And we'd come back in the evening and say, I've had nothing to eat all day. You left me here. There's no food in the flat. And have you written the words? No. I've done some. So we had to stop up all night with Bernard finishing off the words. And then, all right, you lot go to the studio. I'll turn up at lunchtime, which he did. And it was, once we got the words, sort of structure changed and everything. It was kind of like crafting a song, I suppose, which is not what we'd really thought about before. And then he'd come up with these musical terms like inversions and stuff. And Gillian was, oh, yeah, no, that's interesting.
I think Gillian, this was one of the ones when she started writing and she sat with Stephen Hague and they did the strings.
I think it was Stephen Hague again who we started having a producer, which became more, you wrote differently. He was more of an orchestrator as well. And he sort of made you do things that you wouldn't normally do if you were together. So it was like a different set of ears. It felt like, this sounds like a proper record in a way. It was just weird, but it was really good working with him.
Those cracks that had opened up during the production of Brotherhood, of a band torn between tradition and progress, they'd make themselves known again in due course. But for some reason, True Faith represented a period of grace for New Order. Whatever fresh perspective Stephen Hague brought to the mix, it worked. The track had hit record written all over it.
And then we did another one. This other song called 1963, which again, it's like, it came together quite quickly, really. And it's like, you've done two. Yes, actually, you've done two hit singles here today. No, we haven't. We've done an A-side and a B-side. So we're not selling out that much. No, it's a B-side. So 1963 was a B-side. Everybody was very happy. It was brilliant. It was kind of like quirky New Order, and the Americans thought, a hit single. These guys can do it.
When True Faith was released in July of 1987, it became New Order's biggest hit yet, peaking at number 4 in the UK charts and number 32 in the US. Simple as that. And the whole thing was given a boost by another music video, produced by Michael Schamberg and Tom Atencio.
So we get to True Faith, and the video has everything to do with that success, because MTV had adopted the band and was playing it early. And I initially wanted John Paul Good, who was Grace Jones' brilliant art director, to direct the video. Michael was living between New York and Paris at the time. He went to John Paul Good, and John Paul Good said, I'm not available, I'm heavily booked, but there's this wonderful new choreographer.
That choreographer was Philippe de Coufflet, a French mime artist, theatre director and dancer who created a surreal, striking visual landscape for the new single, like a Dali painting brought to life, with futuristic clowns slapping each other in time to the beat and time bounding backwards. There's even shots of the band, a few of them anyway. And there you have it, a hit record, and a video played on repeat on MTV. After the turmoil of Brotherhood, this whole greatest hits idea had been painless.
It was actually a really cheap record that actually turned out amazingly. It is an amazing record. The A side and the B side, because it was still done as an LP, all the singles together, the New Order singles together, make a great record. So it actually worked really well.
Substance looks set to become New Order's biggest release yet, a certified cash cow.
And then I remember Rob coming to us, oh God, and saying that Factory can't afford to pay us the money that they owe us. So I'm going to do a different deal for Substance. Instead of it being 50-50 of the profits to us and to Factory after costs, it's going to be 2/3 to Factory and 1/3 to us, so that Factory can earn the money to pay us back for all the other LPs they hadn't paid us for. And we, like fucking idiots, agreed to it. And now I'm sitting there thinking, that was the stupidest, letting somebody have a bigger cut of your record so they could pay you back for the other records that they hadn't paid you because of the fucking Hacienda. It was the most ridiculous thing.
But Substance was about more than just VAT bills and a floundering nightclub. It was a rare opportunity to reflect on the journey up until that point. All those fantastic singles collected together, time capsules from various ups and downs on the rollercoaster ride of New Order. A simple idea, but an effective one. Even for Peter Saville, who poured so much thought into New Order's artwork, there was no point complicating things with Substance.
You know, even if I had sat down and listened to that compendium of singles, there would be no simple coherence between them because they covered a long period of time. You can do a sleeve for a single, if you wish, and you can make an image that in some way articulates that title. But even with an album, there are 8 tracks, there are 10 tracks, there are 12 tracks. And even though the album has a collective title, it doesn't actually summarize the sum of its parts.
Peter Saville saw no way to adequately represent the entire history of this artistic project with a single image. And so he didn't. The sleeve for Substance was New Order's most transparent yet. Just the name of the band, the title and the year in a foreboding black font on a white background. It looks a little bit like a tombstone, oddly enough for a record that would in some ways launch a new life for New Order.
Substance went on to sell 2 million of a double LP in America when it was released. The sales of it are gargantuan. It sold so many records because it was such a great record. You know, you couldn't hold that record back. So yeah, it was a great idea of Tony's. Maybe he deserved 2/3 for having the idea to do it. I mean, I'm not joking. All he wanted to do was play it in his car. That was the reason. And we weren't bothered. We didn't have to promote it. We didn't have to do anything with it.
And the people buying it, the individuals behind those figures, for many of them, it was a first introduction to New Order, a compelling entry point to their world. American DJ Veronica Vasica.
I first heard New Order when I was 11 years old. I had a little Sony Walkman, and I had a cassette. And actually, it was Substance, and I just listened to it over and over and over on repeat. And I was, blown away.
Techno producer Daniel Avery.
I have a real distinct early memory of my dad playing New Order massively loudly in the house and just being drawn to it even back then, just for how catchy the choruses were and how big the sound was. From there, I just became obsessed with them as a teenager.
Alexis Taylor of the band Hot Chip was only 7 when Substance came out. But he remembers it too.
My brother Will had the compilation Substance on tape, double tape of that. I listened to all of those singles collected together and the B-sides.
And it was True Faith's B-side that would prove particularly inspirational over the years.
The song 1963 was the one that I most got drawn back to over the years. I remember covering that at home as a teenager, just sort of finding something interesting in the love story there and not really knowing, is this a kind of homosexual story or is he singing from the perspective of a woman whose male partner is like turning a gun on her? I couldn't really fully understand, but I've always loved that song. And in the early days of Hot Chip would try and like throw covers of that into our own songs.
He told me to close my eyes. My gift would be a great surprise. I saw tears were in his eyes. He never meant to hurt me. Oh God, Johnny.
Alexis Taylor wasn't the only one pondering the meaning of 1963, as Gillian Gilbert discovered at a recent trip to the doctors.
And he said, "Oh, what exactly do you do?" And I went, "Oh, I'm in a band." "Oh, yeah. What band is it?" "New Order." I was just about to say, "Have you heard of them?" And he went, "Oh, you were the soundtrack to my student days." And he was like dead taken aback. And then during the end of the session, he said, "Can you tell me what 1963 is about, please?"
The success of Substance would launch New Order to an entirely new level in America, one they'd never have been able to predict back in the days of Joy Division.
Despite everything that we'd done, and despite ourselves, we were playing to 30, 35,000 people. And I remember when we played with Pill, Johnny Rotten used to get really pissed off because I'd say to him, "Do you want to come for a walk out front?" And he'd say, "I can't fucking go out front, okay." And I went, "No, I can." Because nobody knew what I looked like, because we'd not done much press. We didn't have particularly our pictures on the sleeves. So, yeah, I was able to walk around these huge venues full of thousands and thousands of people, and nobody recognised me. But Johnny Rotten couldn't, and yet, yeah. I mean, God bless him, he didn't understand New Order. He did not understand it, and he made no bones of telling you. I'd known him quite well, and he'd go to great lengths to tell me how fucking shit we were. What does she do? What does he do? He can't sing, she can't play, he can't drum, you're off your head. You know, he was like, he just didn't get it. It was absolutely hilarious, considering he was our inspiration. You know, you couldn't have been further apart at that point.
It's true that super producers and the Billboard Hot 100 aren't exactly punk, but the times they were are changing, and New Order had entered their blockbuster era. That year they embarked on their biggest US tour yet, a co-headline affair with Echo and the Bunnymen. Echo and the Bunnymen had been born on the same post-punk circuit as Joy Division, and Will Sargent from the band always remembers the first time he saw them.
Nobody was watching them. I put this in my book. There's nobody was watching them. And I said, "You're going to come and have a look at these? They're great." You know, and I went out. There was like a little sort of area outside of where the sort of bands played. There was like this little bar area. And everybody came in, like Mac and Julian Cope and Paul Simpson, all these crew. You know, all our mates came in, and we were all just blown away. It was just like, the other week, these were called Warsaw. They were shit. What's going on? You know what I mean?
I was moving through the silence with that potion, waiting for
Now, the better part of a decade later, the two bands found themselves a long way from the north of England, swapping headline slots night by night for audiences of 10,000 or more, which must have felt pretty weird.
Ladies and gentlemen of Southern California, to quote an old friend of mine from Manchester in England, who do you think is the greatest pop group in the world? I think it's New Order.
Yeah, it's weird. Of course it's weird, but it was like, there was a bit where you were kind of like, you get on stage, you'd enjoy the gigs, but you'd enjoy what happened after the gigs slightly more, and that was probably why you were doing a lot of it.
Evening.
And what exactly was going on after the gigs, Stephen?
If I'm honest, I mean, you can sum it all up in one word, and it's cocaine, basically. And it's a road to nowhere, really. But once you're on it, you're on it. And nobody's going to say stop because, hey, you're the guys that are in charge. That kind of changes your outlook on the world, really. You become something that you never really wanted to be, but you always looked up to, oh, it's great, those guys. I don't like the music, but it would be nice to do that. But you kind of, it's an insidious thing that you get suckered into. Or you did at the time. That whole American major label, cocaine, quaaludes, excess was rife at the time, and it didn't do anybody any good.
New Order were fully embracing the stereotypes of 1980s excess. They rounded off a triumphant year with one last single, which was recorded for the movie Salvation by a director called Beth B.
We had to write Touched by the Hand of God for this film soundtrack because she wanted a song. We'd already done some instrumental, but she said, no, I really need a song. So we were like, this was at like 11 o'clock at night.
With a deadline approaching, Peter Hook decided to boldly step forward into a new world. He put down his bass guitar and approached the sequencer.
I'm sure he had one hand in his pocket as though any fool can play this, I think that was his attitude as well. But yeah, he did come up with a bass line for that, so he could do it on a bass sequencer.
With the song finished, there was the matter of another music video to think about. And the band had a bright idea. And did I mention, there might have been some cocaine knocking about at this time.
We wanted to do a heavy metal spoof. We'd been around America and MTV was full of White Snake and Poison and Fluffy Hair. And it's like, wouldn't it be great? Because that's the last thing people would expect of us, to do a flamboyant whack video.
Enter the picture, future Oscar winner Catherine Bigelow.
I mean, she'd obviously suspected quite rightly that none of us could dance. And we did have to have choreography lessons, and we had to have people to dress us as glam metal rockers. And look, he just looked exactly the same. You couldn't tell that he'd been styled in any way.
Touched by the Hand of God hit number 20 in the UK charts when it came out. Yet another hit for a band that was making a habit of them. New Order were indeed a long way from that Sex Pistols concert where they'd first decided to form a band. But just when it looked like they might be drifting away from the zeitgeist, awaiting their inevitable induction to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, something new was bubbling up all around them.
While we were there in Ibiza, we had no idea this thing called acid house was happening. It's happening down the road.
Next time on Transmissions, a case of right place, right time.
And then we discovered the clubs.
Or maybe wrong place, wrong time, depending on how you look at it.
What got done? Well, you don't get a ton like this for nothing.
The band decamped to Ibiza for a little quality bonding time and some hard work in the studio.
As Tony Wilson rightly said, I took him to the airport and he went through immigration, security to get on the plane. And then he came out, he went, "Oh, Hooky." And he shouted me over to the security. And I went, "What's the matter?" And he went, "This is the most expensive holiday you've ever had. Bye."
Don't sweat the technique. Transmissions. The definitive story of Joy Division and New Order is a Cup and Nuzzle production. It's presented by me, Elizabeth Holker. Our series producer is Frank Palmer. If you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating or review wherever you listen to your podcasts.